Welcome to another episode of the 2.5-year series on the network of global corporate control. We're doing this segment again without using the teleprompter that I circulated. I said that we were going to be talking about Jigsaw Puzzle 2, which is that we've been putting the pieces of a very big puzzle together, and now I'm just going to be speaking to you extemporaneously because the teleprompter is not working. The jigsaw puzzle is that we've been working together in a coalition that was predicted by a power transition model that came to me when I was working in the World Bank's legal department. I was there for 21 years. I was hired in 1986 by Ibrahim Shihada, who was an Egyptian lawyer who was working for OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, before he became the General Counsel of the World Bank. I had actually tried to work at the World Bank for many, many years because I studied development economics, and if you're interested in development, then you want to go to the World Bank, which is what I actually wanted to do. The reason why it was so difficult to get hired into the World Bank is, first of all, because it's in Washington, D.C., and many Americans want to work there. And as an American, I had some pretty hard competition. But as you've seen through the 2.5-year series, I'm a rather persistent person. As a matter of fact, I'm off the charts in persistence. I don't take no for an answer. And as you see, I'm going to be working with everybody who I can possibly work with to take down the banking cartel, because I discovered when I was in the legal department that there were a lot of fishy things going on, and I was going to do my job. I thought it was my job to get the books of the World Bank to be straight, and they were not straight. The books in the entire financial system are not straight because we've been dominated by a banking cartel. That's not only the bankers, which are actually just one bank, but it's most of the companies on the capital markets. We know this because of a very accurate study that was done by 3 mathematicians at the Federal Institute of Technology, which they published in 2011. And so, when I say I'm working together with the entire world, that's exactly what it is, because the World Bank was set up as a cooperative. At the time in 1944, when there was the first meeting, there were 44 countries, but at the moment there's now 189 members. Most of the countries of the world are members, but most of the countries of the world are really companies because of the banking cartel, which has gone in and rearranged things, and now we've got our hands full. We have to what you call wind down, because the banking cartel owes us over $2 quadrillion. This is because the Federal Reserve issued bonds in the 1930s, and those bonds carried interest. They were issued in exchange for the world's gold, and people would accept the bonds in exchange for their gold, and they thought they were going to get interest on it. And then all of these bonds were collected in a trust by Jose Rizal and Ferdinand Marcos, and this trust is now with the Global Debt Facility, which is managed by the World Bank and IMF. The World Bank and IMF were set up for this purpose. And now that I found out, and by default, I'm working with all the people in the world who are the beneficiaries of this trust. It's a big job, but somebody has to do it, and I'm getting a lot of help. One of the places that I'm getting help is from the comments section. When I upload the videos at the end of each segment, I'll do that for tonight's segment as well. And many of the comments are actually given by sock puppets. Those are special purpose accounts. They'd like you to think that they're human beings, but they're really not. They may be employees of the banking cartel, and they're making comments, but when you read these comments, you can see that this is a good way of finding out what the banking cartel has up its sleeve. I believe that one of the things that they've been doing with DCTV is they've been sabotaging us. This is not the first time that we've had trouble with the teleprompter, but be that as it may, you'll just have to accept some extemporaneous comments instead. I've taken a few notes. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about was what happened with Dominique Strauss-Kahn. A few years ago, there was a huge scandal about how he was a womanizer. But what you would see in the teleprompter, and I'm going to upload that at the end of the segment when I put this up on YouTube, you'll see that Dominique Strauss-Kahn was trying to find out about the world's monetary gold reserves in the global debt facility. These monetary gold reserves are going to be exchanged in our currency for the paper currencies that are now issued by the central banks. And they're actually all just one bank. As I told you, this is what the three mathematicians found out when they studied the capital markets. They saw that the directors of most of the companies were all interlocking. They were the same directors. So for all practical purposes, all of the banks of the world are just one bank because they've got the same directors on their board. That's not a good arrangement. And this outfit owns most of the media. So when you turn on the TV, you're going to get a story that the banking cartel wants you to believe. You're being manipulated. A lot of people have gotten the idea that there's something radically wrong with the media. And I got an email a couple of days ago that there was a company that spent a lot of money to try to prove this. Now, you can send me an email as well. I do answer all my emails. But what I've found out over the years is that many of the people that are writing me are just trying to send me disinformation. So most of the people that are writing me are actually the banking cartel. And through the years, I've also been disclosing their various plots and schemes to try to steal the wealth that belongs to humanity. And I've not gone along with it, and I won't go along with it. You'll have to you'll have to bear with me as we go forward, because you'll see that I am remarkably consistent. I try to walk a straight and narrow path, and when I make a mistake, I admit it. I got a phone call a couple of days ago from an Andrew, and Andrew reminded me about a mistake that I made 4 years ago, because the banking cartel has been putting a lot of interviews, where 4-year-old interviews, and trying to convince people that they're recent interviews. And the mistake that I made was I was telling people about a different species of human beings that I called coneheads. This is just a theory. It's unproven. And I renounced it. I walked away from it. And then I found out that Dr. Edward Spencer, who was the person who gave me that theory, was working together with other banking cartel agents, including Andrew Lambremont Weber. So they were just trying to get me to be discredited. And instead, what I did was I just learned that I had made a mistake, and I admitted to my mistake. So if you see any of these old interviews, just realize that they're old, and I've renounced that theory. I'm focusing on the global currency reset, which is replacing the currencies issued by the banking cartel, this one big colossal bank that owns all the media. I'm replacing those currencies because they think that they've got the right to charge us interest on country debt. And when we pay our taxes, the taxes all go to pay that interest. We found this out from the Grace Commission report that Ronald Reagan had commissioned, and I've been giving you links to that study, and many of those links have since been broken, but I've found some more current links that do work. So we're just going to be stopping country debt because of the bonds that are held by the Global Debt Facility that are worth $2 quadrillion. That offsets country debt. If you owe somebody money and they're claiming that and you're claiming that you also are owed money from them, the debts cancel each other out. So the country debt that the banks are claiming we should be paying taxes for, they're canceled out by the debt that's in the Global Debt Facility, the $2 quadrillion, the bonds that the Federal Reserve Bank issued, and they issued them in the 1930s, and the interest on those bonds has been compounding. And so we don't owe the bankers country debt. The bankers owe us the money, and we're going to wind them down. We're going to put them into bankruptcy. There are people who are claiming that they are our leaders, and I've put many of them into bankruptcy as well. I've used the common law instead of the banker's law. The judges that are sitting in the federal courts, they're actually all working for the banking cartel. And they're not, they've suspended the Constitution without telling us. And I've proven this. I've written this to any number of lawyers, including to Neil Gorsuch, and I've bankrupted him as well. And one of the people that I bankrupted and is in the teleprompter, and you can read it, is John Kerry. And I put a clip up on the internet about secret societies and skull and bones, and you'll see an interview in the link in the teleprompter where John Kerry has had a young student arrested and then given electroshocks by tasers because he asked John Kerry about his membership in Skull and Bones, and he also told John Kerry that there was a theory that Kerry had actually been elected as president or vice president and refused to take his office. So there's a lot of corruption, which we're going to be sorting out and getting to the bottom of. And the banking cartel, which has been hiding itself, if you do an internet search using Google, that's actually been, it's not what you think. The results that you're getting back are not objective. They're going through Google's special little tricks. So you need to do your own thinking for yourself. That's also not always easy to do because many of the, there's military technology which can interfere with the way you're processing your thoughts. And this may sound outlandish, but you ought to do a little research into the patents that are registered. And many of the universities have been doing research on this technology. What they do is they attach people to electrocardiograms, and then they map the areas of their brains that are processing the it's a way of seeing how the brains, what areas of the brains are active according to which thoughts they're being directed to. It's like hypnotism, and some people are actually more sensitive than others to this kind of technology. We've shown you a clip of Poland's Minister of Finance where he was referring to this technology. So yes, there are very outlandish things, but you ought to get yourself current in them, and we're going to work together so that we can pierce some of this secret information and get ourselves up to speed. That's one of the purposes of the global currency reset. I'm looking at my notes, as I said, because the teleprompter doesn't work. And one of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about is General Dunford, because General Dunford was planning on trying to get a hold of the monetary gold reserves of the United States, although he wasn't entitled to them. This would have plunged us immediately into World War III. But it didn't work because I've been given the job of something called Overseer Mandate Trustee, and I'm actually the person who votes the shares on the Board of Governors for the United States. The reason that I have this job is because our elected government was actually not elected. I wrote a letter to Mr. Ferriero, who was in charge of convening the Electoral College, and I reminded him that since the Constitution of 1789 was not in effect, there was no Electoral College, and that means that Donald Trump is not the legitimate president of the United States. The Board of Governors of the World Bank actually understands this as well, and therefore they're not paying any attention to the illegitimate government of the United States. I'm there as a representative of the United States until we put our Constitution back into effect. And I've been given the job of speaking for the representatives of the people who are the beneficiaries of the global debt facility containing the world's monetary gold reserves. And that's what I do. I report to you, and until we have actual legal governments, which we do not have now, I'm going to have to be finding ways of figuring out what it is that you all want me to do. And I'm responsive, and I try to keep everybody informed. The way that I do that is through these broadcasts. And I answer your questions. So please send me an email if you have a question, or make a comment on the YouTube, and also interact with each other and try to issue local currencies, because that's also one of the ways for us to take back our world. And the likelihood is that that's exactly what we do. I've been following a very accurate political science modeling tool that came to me at the World Bank in 2004. And this model has a track record of being 90 to 95% accurate. And it's telling me that yes, all we have to do is persist, and we will wind down the banking cartel, and we will clean up our corrupt currency. That's one of the sources of corruption. That's one of the main sources of corruption. And we have a very large task, obviously, ahead of us, but we will prevail, and we'll get the job done. One of the other things that I wanted to talk to you about was what happened with Barry Kamish. He was, because he died this year, he was an Israeli-Canadian journalist and reported some very shocking information And I've given you one of the stories that he wrote in the teleprompter. What happened in the founding of Israel was that a lot of the anti-Semitism was started by the people, the Zionists in Jerusalem, that wanted Germans to move to Israel. And so they were collaborating with the Nazis to foment anti-Semitism in Germany. So a number of people did move to Israel because of the anti-Semitism that the people in Jerusalem were fomenting in cooperation with the Nazis. It sounds outlandish, but yes, this is what happened. And just before Barry Kamish was murdered by Mossad, they were objecting to one of the stories that Barry Kamish was reporting on. That story was how over 4,000 Yemeni babies and children were exported to the United States. They were from Yemeni parents who had moved to Israel, and so these children were then traded by the Israelis to be used as guinea pigs in experiments to find out how human beings reacted to radiation. This is a horrible story, but Barry Kamish broke that story, and a day after Mossad learned that Barry Kamish was telling people this story, he was murdered. So this Barry Kamish is a hero, obviously, and we need to realize that there is a reality is very nuanced, and when you realize how generous people are, and how some of them, like Barry Kamish, risk their lives to bring us the truth, then it's not so easy for the banking cartel to divide us. That's their favorite game, divide and conquer. And in the teleprompter that you can read, again, I was talking about how some of the questions that I've been asked were designed to show people that I was not a person. Well, the point that they were saying was, since I was Jewish, there was no way that I was going to tell people the truth about the banking cartel, because the group that's behind the banking cartel, it's not the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds are part of the problem, but they're at the lower end of the hierarchy. The people at the very center, they're called the bloodline families, and they come to us through the ages from the pharaohs and also the Knights Templar. So Barry Kamish, again, was a person who understood where the reality was. One of the other people that has been helping me, well, there are so many people that have been helping me, but I ran a program in July about who the head of the snake is. And this is the Templars. These are the people that are hiding behind the Zionists. They're not the ones responsible for what's been going on with the banking cartel. So one of the other things that I've been talking about that people had been objecting to is that we are not going to be taking revenge against the head of the snake. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be trying to figure out what reality is. And an important thing to find out is what is our true history, because we've been confused about what our true history is. There is Moscow State University has a very good website called Chronologia, and I'll put the link to that up after the show. And you'll see that the chronology of our history is very different than what we've been told. For example, the Greeks, they're not in BC. They're actually from the Middle Ages. And that's just one of the things that the Russians have been telling us. Let me see what else I was going to mention to you all. Oh yes, I hadn't spoken this time about how the U.S. military has been invaded the CIA because they understand that the CIA is not working for the security interest of the United States. They're actually headquartered in Switzerland, and they're working for the banking cartel. And all of the intelligence agencies are actually all working for the banking cartel. Luckily, though, we've got the global debt facility so that we have a way in the center of coordinating our fight against the banking cartel. But we don't have to have command and control. You can just do whatever you think is the most effective way of fighting the banking cartel. And as we all resist, which indeed we will, there's no reason for us to be paying our income taxes to the banking cartel when, as I've told you, the banking cartel owes us $2 quadrillion through the bonds that were issued by the Federal Reserve when they bought the gold that people had. So yes, we're going to have a very detailed bookkeeping. It's going to take us a long time because the accountants have been part of the problem. And I'm being told now that it's the time to wrap up this segment. I'll see you next week, and I look forward to working together with everybody as we take down the banking cartel. Thank you.